Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So, happiness, how do we get it? How do we keep it? Is it what we're all after? I wanted to check in with Teresa Greco, who is a happiness expert. A happiness expert. Can you believe that? What a great job. And she's the host of the weekly internet TV show called The Steps to Happiness Show with Teresa Greco. She's a 3 times best-selling author, an educator, and an educational technologies consultant with a master's degree from Toronto. She's the editor and senior writer at 2 different Canadian lifestyle magazines, as well as a contributor to 3 different international magazines. As a life coach and a Reiki master, she does public speaking, holds workshops, and mentors others about embracing, honoring, loving, and celebrating their true, authentic selves and achieving their own personal happiness and fulfillment. You can follow Teresa on her Instagram page and Facebook page, Steps to True Happiness with Teresa Greco. Teresa, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. And I love the way you're rolling the R's in my name.
Sorry, Greco. I apologize. Greco. So isn't that making me happy? So I should be able to do it.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong. Teresa Greco. So how did you get into studying and practicing and teaching and coaching happiness?
Thank you so much for that question. So basically, I started my happiness journey 10 years ago, where for me, it was approaching 40 that allowed me to take a step back and really evaluate my life. It's like those, people have different crossroads in their life that will cause them to pause. Sometimes it's illness, sometimes a death, sometimes it's a loss of a job, different things like that. For me, it was that milestone of turning 40 that allowed me to do that. And so in the evaluating of my life, I realized that my life had achieved all the things that society, culture, family, religion tell you that you should achieve in order to have a happy life. So fulfilling career, beautiful, healthy family, our own home, vacations a year, lots of beautiful material things. And so if I had achieved all of those things that, as I said, society, culture, family, religion told me I needed to have a happy life, why was it that I did not feel happy and fulfilled? That I was on this satisfaction treadmill of trying to do more or be more than who I was. And then maybe I would fill this void, this feeling that something was missing in my life. And that's kind of how it all started, that it was me realizing that I wasn't happy, I wasn't fulfilled, despite the fact that on the outside, my life looked perfect.
And did you find happiness through that process?
Yes, I did. Yes. And so that then started me on my journey that I practice all of the happiness principles and practices that I now coach, write, and speak about. I practice it on a daily basis because happiness is our essential nature. It's our original nature. That, and what I mean by that is that when we are born into this world, we are love, peace, and happiness. We see that innate nature in children. They are all of those things, but the world then very slowly takes us away from it.
Really? Love, peace, and happiness.
They are all of those things. We see that in children. And I'm an educator of 25 years, a parent myself, and I observe love, peace, and happiness in young children all the time. But as they get older and it's like, say, the world gets a hold of them, that it starts to pull us away from that essential nature, that our original state that we are in. And then we have to work at tapping into it all the time. So we get angry, we get frustrated, things happen every day that pull us away from the happiness that's always inside of us to feel. It's always there. The peace is always inside of us to feel. We don't have to travel, thousands of miles to get to some remote location or vacation to feel at peace or happy. It is inside of us at any moment to feel. But the thing is, we don't always make time to connect with it. And that's the key part, is that how much time are you making to connect with the happiness that's always inside you to feel?
So somehow you think that what the key to success is, that we've got to connect up with the inside portion of us that is truly happy.
Yes, that's right. So, some people talk about that part of us as maybe that intuition, that gut instinct. It is, in essence, our spiritual self that we are connecting to through a process of, like, say, a practice like meditation or mindfulness or exercise, or when we're maybe cooking or doing art or any of these things that allow us really to tap into something that exists inside of us at any moment to feel. That's what people go, well, I feel so good when I'm listening to music or dancing, or when I'm fishing or doing any of those things. It's not the fishing that's making you happy. It's the fishing. It's providing you an opportunity to tap into the happiness that's inside you at any moment to feel. So during the pandemic, it was really important to recognize that as certain liberties and activities got taken away from us, that we weren't able to participate in those things. It's not the activities themselves that are providing the happiness, is that those activities are providing a vehicle for you to feel the happiness that's inside you always to feel. So when you're at that sports game and you're all in the moment, it's in those times that you're not thinking about your problems. You're not thinking about the things that you need to do. You're very much in the moment. And it's in those times that when we are in the moment, we are feeling happiness that's all, as I said, always there for us to feel.
So is that as simple as the old line about stop to smell the roses?
Sorry, say that again.
Is that as simple as the old line about stop to smell the roses?
Yes, yes. And being really mindful of what's happening in that present moment, right? So when you're out at dinner with friends and you're having a good time and you're completely immersed in the conversation and the food and the music and the lighting and all of that, it's not the restaurant or the venue that's providing the happiness. It's that in that moment, you are completely in the now, which is where happiness is found. It is found in the now moment. And so it is really about making time to connect with that part of ourselves that, as I said, that's always there for us to feel. And it's important for us to recognize what those things are that help us to tap into that happiness. And it's different for everybody. And so I call it a happiness toolkit, in that, what might work for me that helps me to be in the moment and to feel the happiness that's inside me to feel could be different than what it is for somebody else. And it's what science calls those flow moments, when you are completely in the now, you're like, in the zone. It's that where you're in essence connecting with a part of yourself that maybe you don't always make time to connect with. So we are often, very much in our physical self, our mental self, a lot of times in our mental self, our emotional self as well, that we're reacting to things emotionally, but our spiritual self is also there. It's the inside of us. It's not the external part. It's the internal part of us that we don't always make time to connect with as well, or we don't know how to connect with it. But I know that over the pandemic, a lot of people have made time to start to go inward and to recognize that inside of us, we can feel that peace, we can feel that love, we can feel that happiness that exists there as I said, at any moment. So for me, that is like a huge weight has been taken off your shoulders when you know that you no longer have to achieve happiness. You no longer need to strive for happiness. You no longer need to earn happiness or be worthy of happiness, or having to buy it by spending, a lot of money on fancy cars and designer clothing and expensive vacations and all of that. That it's none of those things. That if anything, those are more is what we consider pleasure versus that real happiness. So it's more of that hedonic happiness where you feel like in the moment, but then a couple hours later or 3 days later or a week later, when you come back from that vacation, or you settle into that promotion that you worked so hard for, that the high of that moment then kind of like fades away, and you're left with, now what? Now what do you need to move on to in order to feel that sense of happiness again? And so that is, as I said, I was on that satisfaction treadmill myself, looking for that next, what is it that's going to make me feel happy again, not recognizing that my essential nature was already happy, and I just
Teresa?
wasn't connecting with it.
Teresa Greco, talking about happiness. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back in 2 minutes, and we're going to talk more about the difference between pleasure and happiness and meaning and self-love in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Our guest tonight is Teresa Greco. I will try not to do that with rolling my R's. Teresa Greco. Teresa Greco. She is a happiness expert, and she's the host of a weekly internet TV show called The Steps to Happiness Show with Teresa Greco. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Teresa before, but probably about a year ago. And so it's a pleasure It's happy. It's wonderful to check in with Teresa again. Teresa, I wonder if I could sort of check you into a couple of different terminologies that people use, and check with you of how some of them have been described to me, and see if I have an understanding that you would agree with or is right. So people have described to me sort of pleasure versus happiness versus meaning in a couple of ways. People have described that pleasure is that immediate pleasure dopamine rush you get from something that might be an addictive kind of thing, whether it be alcohol or drugs or whatever it is that you want to go and get that makes you immediately happy, but it's fleeting and it's just pleasure. And that happiness, I think you've described as more of a long-term sense, and maybe it's something that you've described is more in the moment, or you're in the zone. But then other people have said happiness shouldn't be the objective; it should be meaning. And the description that I was given is that you can be, more happy going out and partying or going out for a dinner, but meaning might be staying home and taking care of your kids or your elderly parents. And so therefore it may not be as happy as what you could do, but long-term, it'll give you more satisfaction, more meaning, more passion for life if you do those things that are long-term in providing meaning in life. And, it's that book that Frankl wrote about, In Search of Meaning. What do you think about that sort of separation between the ideas of pleasure versus happiness versus meaning?
So pleasure, as I would say, is more of that hedonic happiness, where it is fleeting. You feel it in the moment. There's that kind of immediate gratification maybe that you experience because you're eating that piece of chocolate, or you're at that concert, or that when that moment is gone, then you're kind of left not feeling happy again. And then there's more of the long-lasting sense of happiness, which is eudaimonic happiness. And that then does embody more of what you're talking about, that there is a sense of meaning. There's actually a whole bunch of different elements that then contribute to that longer lasting, let's say, sense of happiness or joy. I equate the word happiness and joy as the same thing. And so having more meaningful relationships, more a meaningful job, more purpose, let's say, to what you're doing does, yes, contribute to you feeling a greater sense of true happiness, let's say, versus pleasure. There are also characteristics that people might embody as well, such as positivity. Research has shown that people that are more positive tend to be more happy. And they live longer as well. So a lot of positive psychology really goes into some of the behaviors as well as the characteristics or traits that people have that contribute to more of that eudaimonic happiness, which is that longer lasting, more fulfilling happiness. And so I just go actually a step further by I would say that recognizing that happiness is more than just a state of mind, that it is actually a state of being, and that it is more than just thinking happy thoughts in the moment, because then when things happen to go wrong, then you're not thinking happy thoughts because you've been fired or you've had an argument with your partner or any of these things, then you're not feeling happy. And happiness is more than just, oh, I feel really great right now and then I don't feel great. It as a state of being, it's something that you embody through all four aspects of ourselves. So when we love and accept ourselves, so our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual self, when we're connecting and nurturing all aspects of ourselves, is where then we can experience more of that longer lasting, more fulfilling happiness that you're talking about.
Awesome. You used two terms that I'm not familiar with, and I wonder if you could explain them. You said that it was eudaimonic. What's that term?
So yes, so there's happiness has been looked at. I believe it was Aristotle that established those two terms. So the hedonic happiness versus eudaimonic happiness.
So sorry, what are they again? Mnemonic? Hedonic versus
eudaimonic. Hedonic, which is like what we talk when we talk about hedonism.
Got it.
And then there's eudaimonic, which is more of the longer lasting, truer happiness.
Oh, really? So even Aristotle was separated out the difference between pleasure and long-term happiness.
Yes, and he also acknowledged that true happiness is actually part of the soul. And even the word psychology, actually, which is become the science of the mind, that psyche actually means soul. And so initially psychology was the study of the soul, but then, over the years and science gets to it and whatnot, it's now become the science of the mind. But it was initially, the meaning of the word psychology means soul, the study of the soul or science of the soul.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. So one of the reasons why I wanted to check in with you is you posted a lot recently about self-love. Is self-love one of the preconditions to happiness?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In order for us to be truly happy, we must be happy with ourselves. And to be happy with ourselves, it means that we're unconditionally loving and accepting ourselves exactly as we are. And I know with my own happiness journey that I could not look at myself directly in the eyes, in the mirror, and say to myself, I love you. I love everything about you. And with my conversations with people or with my coaching clients, many of us are not in that place where we can completely say to ourselves, I love you. I love everything about you. I love you unconditionally. I'm accepting you unconditionally. And so yes, to be happy, we must be happy with ourselves. And if we were all happy with ourselves, then we would just be spreading love and happiness to others, because it just exudes from you. And the world would just be a happier place if we all were really happy with ourselves. But many of us are not happy with ourselves.
Well, lots of us want to be healthier or more physically fit or lose some weight or better looking or more educated or more successful in our careers. So how do you achieve that unconditional true love for yourself if all those things are reality?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so that's what I think we're going to talk about today, is how do we make time to connect with and nurture and love all aspects of ourself? What does it mean to love our mental self, our physical self, our emotional self, and our spiritual self?
Okay, so tell us.
To love ourselves means more than just, oh, I'm going to go to the spa, one day a year, or I'm going to get my hair done or my nails done. Yes, taking care of our physical self is absolutely one component of it, but we're more than just our physical self. We have those other aspects as well. So if we want to start with the physical self, then the ways that we can do that, as you said, we We may want to lose some weight. We may want to eat healthier. We're going to go ahead and nourish our bodies with vitamins and nutrients. We're not going to pollute our bodies with toxins like alcohol and drugs, because if you really love your body and you understand that your body is the temple to all the aspects of ourself, that my body is what carries me through every single day in this world, and that it allows me to do all the things that I want to do, all the goals that I have for myself, the aspirations I have for myself, that if my physical body isn't in top shape, how can I do any of those other things that I want to do and that I need to do? So our physical self, as I said, is more than just let me go get my hair done. It's an everyday thing that if I really love emotionally, that when I'm loving myself, then physically, it just naturally is like, okay, no, I'm not going to eat processed foods. I'm not going to eat fried foods. I'm not going to go to the McDonald's. I'm going to go to my doctor when I feel like there's something that doesn't feel good within myself. It's really tuning into your body and understanding the communication. So all aspects of ourself is constantly communicating with us. But many times we have pains in our body and we're like, oh, I'll just take an Advil. Oh, I'll just do recreational drugs, or whatever people want to do to try to numb out what their body is actually telling you. And that if you're not going to the washroom properly and you're having gas and bloating and you have allergies and all these things that your body is like screaming at you saying, I need help. Like maybe you need to schedule that appointment to go to the dentist because your tooth is hurting, or to go to the massage therapist or physiotherapist or all these things. But a lot of us just put it on the back burner and say, no, I don't have time for that. But if our physical self if we're not loving our physical self, how can we expect that part of us to be there for us when we have to show up in all the other aspects of our life? And so when we really love ourselves, then I feel like it's just a natural extension that I'm not going to smoke. I'm going to go and see those doctors or practitioners or whoever I need to go to see. And when I feel an ache or some sense of dis-ease in my body, I'm going to go and get it taken care of instead of just saying, no, I don't have time for that.
Okay, but a lot of
when you're loving yourself, you make time to do what you need to do in order to tend to this vehicle, this vessel that's taking you through the world every day.
Okay, and I can understand that. But is what you're saying, therefore, that if you're not fit, if you're not healthy, if you're not in great shape, if you haven't lost that weight, can you still love yourself physically?
Sorry, Brian, you cut out there. Could you say that again, please?
So what you've described is a whole bunch of things that one does to love their physical self. And you talked about working out, losing weight, eating better, taking care of all the dis-ease that your body might have. So if you're not doing that, if you're not actually in great shape, if you haven't actually lost the weight, can you still love yourself physically?
So that is where the loving the other aspects of ourselves assists in that if we continue to look in the mirror and mentally say terrible things to ourselves, that if our internal self-talk and mental talk is sabotaging ourselves, is limiting ourselves, is telling yourself that you're fat, you're ugly, you're never amount to anything, you're no good, you can't do this. That, of course, that's not mentally loving yourself. In that, when I began to love myself more, I recognized the internal self-talk of what I was saying to myself on repeat that was awful, that were not loving. It was not compassionate at all. And many of us are not being compassionate and loving with ourselves when we say, well, never going to be able to do this. I'm fat and ugly. Nobody's there to, like, we know what all of that dialogue that many of us have on repeat that plays all the time, that every time I looked at myself in the mirror, I was never skinny enough, I was never pretty enough, I was never enough of a lot of different things. And that was the part that I needed to change, that if I was really loving myself, would I be saying those things to myself? Would I be critiquing myself the way that I was? Would I be saying the terrible things that I was saying to myself? That nobody was saying these things. It's an internal dialogue. It's like these old tapes that play in our mind about, as I said, who we are, what we'll ever achieve, who we could ever be, all of those things. And
so it sounds like what you're saying is we have to just be nicer to ourselves and more compassionate to ourselves. We wouldn't say all those insults to another person, so we should stop saying them to ourselves.
Absolutely. And that when you start to, so that's just loving ourselves, let's say on a mental level, because you start to change the thoughts that you're having about yourself. But emotionally, that if you're hating yourself, and I was there, where as I said, every time I looked in the mirror, every time I put a piece of food in my mouth, every time I was in the change room trying something on, and or maybe I happened to outgrow a piece of clothing, I was awful to myself. And so emotionally, I was hating on myself instead of loving myself. So even if we are overweight.
Seriously, hating yourself, not just not liking, but hating yourself. You were hating yourself.
Many people, Brian, loathe themselves because of past trauma, because of things that have happened to them, things that people have said to them, are things that people, like their parents said to them growing up, their teachers said to them growing up, that this all becomes part of the programming, the conditioning that we live under all the time, that we're not even aware of, because it just becomes part of our subconscious or unconscious mind that we don't think about, but it actually plays in the background exactly as a computer program does. And we operate under that all the time. And it's only until do we wake up to that programming can we then become consciously aware of what we need to change. And when we're loving all aspects of ourselves, it allows us to wake up to that programming, to say, wow, when I look at myself and I start to critique myself, am I really loving myself right now when I say that I'm fat and I'm ugly? I'm not loving myself.
But one of the things that one needs to do in life, isn't it, is to be self-critical so that you can know when you've got to lose some weight or get up and go for some exercise. And so isn't part of loving yourself being able to be critical of yourself? Anyway, we're going to take a break. Think about that. And maybe when we come back, you can let me know what you think of that. We're chatting tonight with Teresa Greco, who is a happiness expert. And we're talking about pleasure, happiness, etc. Stay with us, everyone. We're going to be back in just 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Teresa Greco, who is a happiness expert. And she's written 3 different books. She's got an internet TV show. She's a coach. She's an expert. She's a broadcaster. She's a speaker. She's an author. You've just really delved into this big time over the course of the last 10 years. And it sounds like it's really changed your life. Has it changed your life, Teresa?
Yes, it has. And it's something that we work on every single day. It's not like you get to a good point and then you just stay there. It's the world, it's constantly taking you away from that sense of love, peace, and happiness inside of you that, as I said, you have to make consistent effort and carve out time to ensure that you're always realigning yourself, that when we're not in alignment is when we can start to lose touch with that happiness. We start to feel dis-ease in the body. We're maybe not feeling emotionally great about ourselves. We're feeling physically tired. It shows up in so many different aspects of ourselves. And when you were saying just before the break about being critical, is really about being more consciously awake in our life, about the mental things we say to ourselves, how we're living physically, how is my body feeling emotionally, am I loving myself or am I loathing myself? So it is really always being very consciously aware of how you're living in any moment. It's living with your eyes wide open.
You had said that you also have to love yourself spiritually. What do you mean by loving yourself spiritually?
So that is the internal part of us, right? That we're very much conditioned to look outside of ourselves for that love, for that acceptance, for that approval, for that status, for lots of different things. That's just the conditioning that we experience, and as I said, then becomes part of the programming or operating system that a lot of us live by. Is that when we start to go inward is when we're now connecting with that, what people like to maybe refer to as your intuition, that inner knowing, that gut instinct. It's that little voice inside of us that we often don't listen to or we don't hear because we live very much in the mind, in that we are very rational beings, and we, by living more from our head versus from our heart, a lot of people attribute that inside part to that it is part of the emotional self, but it is more of that inner guidance that we don't often listen to, because we say, well, what do I think about this? What do I think? What do you think? What do you think? Instead of actually going inside and asking ourselves, what should I do in this moment, or what direction should I take? And really those people who, and like very successful entrepreneurs and business people that said that they, went on a hunch, that they actually listened to that little voice inside of them, that they ended up taking a completely different direction and being just like hugely successful because they listened to that little voice inside them.
So if you were coaching me and I came to you as an unhappy person, what would you do? How would you coach me to try to be happier?
So there's a whole, Brian, it just sounds so simplistic. Like how could you coach me to all of a sudden be happier? Well, it's very much of a layered approach, in that, we don't just get to a point that we're unhappy by, turning a new chapter in our life, that we get to where we are after like years and years and years of living our life and the different circumstances and things that we've seen and our experience and all of that have led to the moment that we're, or where we are right now in the present moment. And so it is really looking at, there's usually many layers that need to be let's say looked at and examined, so that we can become more consciously aware of how we live our everyday life, instead of just living on autopilot. Many of us on autopilot, that we just get up, we go to work, we do what we do, we come home, we make dinner, we go to sleep, and it's just this cycle of doing the same thing every day. And next thing you know, it's 5 years later, or even during the pandemic, it very much feels like this, that it's like your life feels a bit like a blur, because we're not living our life with eyes wide open, but many of us are just, as I said, on autopilot. And so it is about peeling back the layers, peeling off the mask, peeling off the veil through which we've been living our lives, and through the lens through which we've been looking at life, and taking a look at that.
I hear you, but I don't understand. Please help me. What would we actually, how would you help me do that? Would you ask me questions? Would you probe? How do you actually get someone to peel back the layers as you've described? I don't understand that.
So it is, yes, through many probing questions. Also, so as a certified coach, I have certain tools that I utilize as well. Like there's questionnaires, there's also an online flourishing questionnaire that a person can go ahead and take, that will give some indications of those areas where of weakness and strength. And so all of us have strengths that we really should be leaning upon. And then, but it's important for us to be aware of those weaknesses, but definitely leaning more on our strengths. And so it's finding out what those strengths are and what those pain points and triggers are, what those limiting beliefs are that you have about yourself. Are looking at any past trauma. We all have emotional scars that have been left because of things that people said to us, things that happened in our past that we need to also take a look at, because they leave like little thorns in us, in that when somebody pushes on that little thorn, it causes a little emotional heartache, and it could bring back a whole like flood of thoughts and emotions with that thorn. And so it's important to look at those and maybe change the narrative through which we see those events that happened in our life, by understanding more about why they happened, or the people that maybe participated in that. So I have my own emotional trauma, and understanding, where that I really believe that anybody at any time is doing the best that they can. And even if the best that they can isn't great, but people are all doing the best that they can. And so understanding about my parents' upbringing and how much knowledge they had about certain things, and about being parents and parenting, and the way they parented isn't the way that I parent my own children, but understanding that, also understanding that a lot of what happened to us leads to who we are today. That a lot of actually people that deal with trauma and like coaches, let's say, that if you ask them, would they trade any of what they had to go through to get to who and where they are today, they would say they wouldn't change it. They say that I would go through everything to be who I am today. And it's coming to a place of gratitude for those experiences. So that's why when I say it's multi-layered, there's a lot of different things that you want to look at.
But at the same time, this is not as simplistic as just The Secret and positive thinking, correct?
Oh, more. It's more than just the positive thinking, because that is only the mental self that we're looking at. But the emotional self, as I said, we have these emotional scars that we also need to deal with. A lot of people have skeletons, right? That they just push into the closet or under the rug, and they don't want to deal with those things. But Brian, the truth is that happiness is like a scale, and our trauma and our mistakes and us living in the past and all those limiting beliefs and all those things that if you could imagine those on one side of the scale, and happiness being on the other side. And you might ask people, are you happy? And they're like, yeah, I'm happy. But the truth is, the amount of happiness that they're feeling on the other side of the scale is actually in direct proportion to how much baggage and junk they're carrying on the other side. And that as soon as you start to eliminate those limiting beliefs, those self-loathing comments, that trauma, those mistakes, those regrets, that guilt, that shame, all the stuff that we try to maybe numb out with alcohol and drugs and pushing, as I said, into the closet, we don't want to deal with it, all of that, is that when you start to unload some of that from that side of the scale, that the happiness quotient on the other side goes up. So the amount of happiness that you ever feel is in direct proportion to what's on the other side. And so as you start to unload that and peel back the layers and take off the masks and the veils and looking through life through a different lens, you actually feel happier. And so it is important to do the work. And it is doing the work. It is.
What do you mean doing the work? It sounds like you're almost a psychoanalyst or a psychotherapist.
by doing the work. It is doing the, but I mean, we don't become healthier by not doing the work, right? We have to go to the gym. We have to buy the healthier foods. We have to surround ourselves with more positive and motivating people. It takes effort, but it's like a garden, the same thing. We can't have a beautiful, flourishing and flowery garden without tending to the weeds. And that's what and it's all the time, that even though I might do my look at my garden at the beginning of the week, I'm going to have to go there again next week and just see if there's any new weeds that pop up, because they do.
So it sounds like you've really gone through quite the metamorphosis in the last 10 plus years as you've gone through this happiness journey. What happened to your relationships? What did your friends think? What did your family think? What about your kids? How's the way you've parented changed, if at all?
So when and I said this earlier, that when we work on ourselves, it's almost like literally miraculously everything around you changes. Is that you now are operating on a different energy or frequency that just emanates from you. It's like, those people that when you go into a room, they just light up the space because you can just feel that positivity, that energy coming from that individual, versus and we all know about the negative and awful feeling and angry ones. They're also emanating an energy. And so when you are there loving yourself and are at peace and feeling happy, that just naturally exudes from you, and it impacts everyone around you. We say that happiness is the gift that you give to yourself first, but then it's the gift you offer the world. You offer it to your colleagues, you offer it to your partner, to your kids. And I'll say that the relationships that I felt that I had issues with before all magically went away as soon as I started to love myself, because I was no longer expecting everyone else to fill the gaps that I needed to fill, by going inwards and realizing that all of those things that I had been searching for outside of myself already existed inside of me. I needed to love myself more. I needed to respect myself more. I needed to honor myself more, instead of expecting everybody else to do that for me. And then as soon as I did that for myself, literally, like magically, it all corrected itself. Is that people were all of a sudden more respectful. People were more loving. It's like, Brian, I can't even explain to you like the miracle behind it, but it is really it's an inside job, that as soon as we correct or look at that, as I said, that scale of like, what the junk and burdens that we're carrying on the one side, as soon as we start to deal with that, everything around us changes.
So effectively you're saying they didn't change. What changed was your attitude toward them.
Yeah. And towards myself. And then, so at any moment, the truth is our reality is always mirroring us. Always. And so when things are showing up in our life in ways that we don't really like, those are all there for us to take a look at and to examine and say, what is this? What is it within me that I need to work on so that this stuff doesn't show up in my life anymore? That if you are surrounded by a lot of angry people, most likely you have a lot of anger inside you as well that you need to work on,
right?
Because those angry people don't show up anymore. Like I just don't see them. And the people that are in my life and in my reality are all like very beautiful and loving people. And it's like, I don't even experience those negative Nellies anymore, because they just don't flow into my reality, because it's like karma, right? What we say, what you give out, you get back. It's exactly like that.
Okay, so those people around you haven't changed. Just your attitude toward them have changed. But like, I don't know, but I presume, are you still married to the same gentleman?
Yes.
Okay, so how would he describe you in your, today versus the way you were before this journey? Would he describe you as changing?
I don't. I've never actually asked him that question because I think it's almost like an energy, as I said, that it's hard to even put words to a flow and an energy that everything is just operating by, that is just, it's so peaceful and loving that, you know, and I know this just through the work with the people that I coach, is that all of a sudden the children just became like friendlier with each other, and the chaos that they used to come to when they entered the door after a long day at work just seemed to dissipate, because there's just, it just exudes to everybody around you. And it's just, I think it's the miracle of love.
Okay.
It's the miracle of love.
Not everyone is perfect. Not everyone is loving. And someone that thinks that is often being described as a Pollyanna, that, you know, everything is perfect and they just don't see the bad in the world. Or, you know, have you gone so far in this direction of happiness and loving everything and everybody and not seeing the bad anymore that you become a Pollyanna?
So 99% of how we see the world is our own personal perception. 99%. 1% is how it actually is. So me and you could look at the same tree and describe it in two completely different ways because of how each of us perceive the world. And so it is about looking at that personal lens and becoming consciously aware of how you're looking at things. And when you start to look for the positive, Brian, instead of focusing on the negative. So we have a negativity bias where it's easier for people to look at all the things that are going wrong and to focus on that. And that actually just brings more energy to those negative things, which then goes ahead and just brings more of that into your reality. And so if we started to become, as I said, more consciously aware of that, of how we perceive the world, and start to focus on the things that are going right, on all the little things. It's not the big grandiose things that you're going to have to wait for. It's the tiny little things on an everyday basis that are going well. And those things add up to an overall feeling of well-being, and of course of joy and happiness when we start to focus on those more. So that's important, that we start to flip that switch, or start to look at the world by not focusing on the negative, but instead training our eyes and our mind to look more to the positive. And that then just invites more of that to come into your reality.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm a lot happier now than I was an hour ago. So thank you for this positive influence on my attitude and my happiness. We've been chatting with Teresa Greco, a happiness expert, about happiness. We're going to take a final break and come back in 2 minutes with some concluding comments. Stay with us, everybody. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I've had a happy hour chatting about happiness with Teresa Greco, who is a happiness expert. And it's been kind of happy, fun, and enjoyable, and joyful, and cheerful. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. Thank you so much. And I'm trying to be funny, but I'm not being funny. I'm actually being really honest. I think this has been a really insightful chat. So thank you, Teresa, for that. You said you're doing a PhD in happiness. I never knew there would be such a thing as a PhD in happiness. Tell me, what the heck are you studying in your PhD to get a PhD in happiness?
Thank you. So basically, I am looking at the research that's been done and the different philosophers and psychologists that have done work on happiness through the years, and bringing it up to where it is today, and then taking it a little bit further. So the research up to today, which some of you may have heard about positive psychology, and a lot of that studies the different ways that people can live happier lives, that either they have certain personality traits or characteristics that are internal that help people to be happy, as well as external circumstances that contribute to that. And so where I'm going to be diving into the science behind all of that and the different people over time, of different philosophers and psychologists and all of that, and sociologists. And so bringing happiness up to where it is today, and then taking it a little bit beyond, that I view happiness as a state of being, that it's not only a state of mind, that we, yes, we can think positively, but when you're not thinking happy thoughts, then are you really happy? And I believe that our essential nature, our original nature, is happy. And that if we're not making time to connect and nurture that happiness inside of us, how can we be happy? If we're working 60 to 80 hours a week and not making time to connect to that happiness via meditation, via listening to the music that you like, via hanging out with those friends that you enjoy, exercising, being out in nature, skiing, cooking, whatever those things are for you, if you're not making time to connect with it, how can we be happy? And many of us are not, because we're working too much, and we're not, as I said, making time or scheduling time to connect with that happiness inside of us. And so that's where I'm going to be taking it basically a little bit further.
I look forward to reading your thesis and maybe interviewing you about it. You said during the break that happiness can be a compass. Explain that, please.
So happiness is exactly that it is that guide that can lead us towards our happiest life, and the life that we came here to lead. So in those moments when we are feeling joy within us, we should make note of those things and say, oh, I'm really feeling good in the presence of these people. I'm really feeling good when I'm doing this sort of work. I'm really feeling good when. So making note of that to say, okay, those are the things that I need to be leaning in towards. Those are the things that I should be making more time for, because I feel good when I participate in them. Vice versa, that when we're then feeling not so great because we're in the presence of negative people, or maybe we're in a job that really isn't fulfilling, we have a terrible boss that's demeaning and not respectful, and so those are all clues to say, no, we don't need to rationalize and say, well, it's okay because she's my best friend, well, it's okay because they're going through a rough patch, well, he's my boss. Like, we rationalize situations that aren't us, are not healthy for us, instead of listening to what emotionally we're feeling in that moment. That if I'm not feeling happy, I should clue into that and say, maybe I should hang out with these people less. Maybe I should take time to see if I could switch jobs and move some. And miraculously, again, doors open up, doors close because we shouldn't be there anymore. New doors open because we're supposed to be going into that direction. And so if we look at happiness as a compass, it will lead us towards our happiest life. But we have to tune into that to say, I feel really good in this moment. I need to be doing more of this. And, oh, I'm not feeling so good. What changes can I make? And many people, I would say, they resist the change, or they're not willing to make the effort, or they don't want to do what it takes to make changes. So, leaving those toxic relationships, quitting that job, maybe moving home so they don't have to commute that far, any of those things, dropping the alcohol, eating healthier, all of those things, they all take effort, Brian. So, but if we are committed to ourselves, then we can make those changes.
Sounds like it's your analogy about weeding the garden. So I like that, both the compass analogy and the weeding the garden analogy. Teresa, this has been really fascinating and happy. If people want to check you out, follow you on social media, or follow some of your thinking, how do they do that best?
Thank you so much. So I have a website. You can connect with me there and find out more about me and my services. So it's at teresagreco.ca, and that's Teresa with no H. So teresagreco.ca. You can also check out my weekly internet show that's on Soulivity TV. There is also my Instagram page that I'm very active on as well, which is Teresa Greco _Steps to Happiness, and on Facebook as well, Steps to Happiness with Teresa Greco.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to when you interview me on your Soul TV. Sounds like it'll be kind of a fun conversation. That's our show for tonight. I really enjoyed chatting with Teresa tonight. I think that she's got a lot of some really interesting and very helpful ideas. I like the difference between pleasure or hedonic happiness, the way that she's described, or Aristotle described happiness and happiness, which I think is closer to the idea of meaning that I described earlier, that gives you a long-term sense of self-worth and happiness. I love her 4 parts of self-love: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And the spiritual particularly was kind of interesting. And I loved her analogy of weeding the garden and happiness as a compass. And so I think there's a lot of great ideas in what Teresa's talking about. And Teresa, great luck on the PhD. I look forward to hearing your progress. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend.